and me.
I say something mean about
Wait, did it
everybody.
stop?
Yes, we never
Are we
stop.
live? My screen jumped horrendously. Live from Larry Fink's Scroll, written by Candlelight with Peacock Quill. It's your dump of stakeholder nuggets. I don't like that word dump. Bear in mind, I'm not writing these anymore, so you can't blame me. Joined as always by Emma, laughing stock lurking. Oh, how dare you? And Matt, mostly imaginary Mascardi. Here's hoping for fully imaginary. I'm the black ink of stakeholder capitalism. That's absolutely
correct.
Today in our not woke paraffin covered bag of nuggets called January 18th, 2022, watching tennis is for losers.
No, it's not.
Your new boss hates you. Fink speaks.
Yes.
And Uyghurs may or may not be important.
Ooh, I like a question mark there. Today is a huge news day.
Yeah,
we're gonna have to rip through it.
Get going. Let's just say that for all of you people who follow business pants, how dare you? I don't know what you're up to. But
who are you?
For anyone new, this really is like a hallmark day for our enterprise. This is the most tingly ESG explosion of our favorite stories and our favorite things.
I'd like to make it known I do not feel tingly.
And these are in no particular order, so this is not to say that this is what's most important, but we're gonna go with how they came out. I don't know.
I have ESG pins and needles.
I know.
That's
the
what
first
I have.
one is a very corporate governance-y one. Could this be our first COVID resignation, our first executive COVID resignation, this first story? Here we go. The chairman of Credit Suisse resigns after an inquiry into his pandemic conduct. Matt was so excited about this, he sent it over the weekend. And
I work over the weekend.
Typically, we're governed by French law. You're not allowed to work over the weekend. Or send texts after work hours. After less than a year on the job and after pledging to develop a culture of personal accountability at the Swiss bank following a string of scandals, remember, we reported on all of them, spying on executives, to billion-dollar investment losses. New board chair Antonio Horta Osorio is going bye-bye.
Oh, I'll miss him.
So at his first annual meeting last May, he said, our processes and organization are being reviewed to put a stronger focus on individual responsibility and accountability. Oops. After resigning, his spokesperson said he would not be speaking to the media. Shocker. To be fair, he kept his pledge. This is he's like the only pledge keeper. It's the pledge that killed him, unfortunately, but he kept his pledge. He was forced to resign after barely 8 months in office for flouting coronavirus quarantine rules in both Britain and Switzerland. To be fair, he also said at the AGM, I wish everyone good health and look forward to meeting many more of you soon. So maybe that combination of meeting you and soon and health was a code for F your quarantines. Let's just hang out. So maybe he announced it.
He was wishing you had good health, but would be meeting with you soon,
right,
to spread coronavirus. So he's not lying. He didn't lie.
Just days after promising to clean up the bank by creating a sense of responsibility, he flew to London on a private jet to attend the Wimbledon tennis finals, breaking Britain's coronavirus quarantine rules in the process. And it's time for a COVID coincidence alert. Anti-vax hero Novak Djokovic, Emma's favorite, won that Wimbledon tournament. See?
Wow. It's like all the worlds, like planets aligned, and stars and stuff.
The former chair essentially blamed his staff and said he was unaware he had failed to get the business waiver for British rules, blah, 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 blah. Funny side note, he had intended to take Credit Suisse clients to the tennis tournament, but ended up giving the tickets to his children instead.
When? Why did he give them to the children?
Probably because the clients were stuck in quarantine, is my guess.
Whoops.
An internal investigation also found that he used the corporate jet to drop him off in the Maldives on the way back from a business trip in Asia. Whatever, dude. I mean,
no, it's no big deal. Come on, that's nothing.
Considering a simmering war among Credit Suisse's senior executives and a power struggle with CEO Thomas Gottstein, maybe this was the wrong 8 months to act like a giant ass.
Oh.
Just saying. Credit Suisse declined to comment on whether there were rifts between the former chair and the executive board, including the CEO. That means there were definitely rifts.
Yeah, there were rifts. I would say it's rifty.
The new chair, Axel, ooh, I like that. Lehman is likely to see a return to a more traditional chairman-CEO relationship. He has already insisted in an interview with Reuters that there will be no change to strategy and that the existing management team will remain in place. Ooh, you gotta love another day one pledge. Credit Suisse, the gift that keeps giving.
I love it. Speaking of gifts that keep giving, Larry Fink, the annual stakeholder capitalism letter dropped like a bomb on the taint of capitalism. Whoa. That's right. Our boy Fink Rock let loose the stakeholder kraken, tackling every woke issue from climate change to human capital to voting rights to net zero. Just please don't call it woke. Quote, stakeholder capitalism is not about politics. It is not a social or ideological agenda. It is not woke. That's what he said in the letter. It's
Why
not
is it
woke.
to be woke? I don't get it.
It's not
Tell
woke.
me later, Emma.
Don't call it that. So, Larry, can I call you Larry? After all these years of me criticizing your stupid letters, I feel like I can call you Larry. What is stakeholder capitalism, if not woke? He answers, quote, stakeholder capitalism is all about delivering long-term durable returns for shareholders. There we go. There it is, folks. Every year since 2018, Larry and the Business Roundtable has been writing about stakeholder capitalism. Capitalism that takes into account employees and the environment and stuff. And you dopes thought they meant caring for the stakeholders. No. What they really meant all along is stakeholders need to deliver value to shareholders. Do you understand? That's what stakeholder capitalism is. Look, the rich can't get rich without stakeholders propping them up, fool. You ever see a mansion built by a bunch of rich white guys? Nah, it's the stakeholders banging the nails so the mansion gets built for those shareholders to live in. That's what we're talking about. It also explains why Larry Letter Word Cloud 2000, which I ran his letter through this year, found the words companies, capital, shareholders, and capitalism all ranked over stakeholders. Bang those nails, you fools! You got it? I know. Wait a minute. Let me back up. He dropped the word durable in there. Like he's pressing our woke buttons and slipping in adjectives to suggest companies should, in fact, gently caress their snowflake stakeholders
like me,
as a means of a profitable end. He dropped the word in durable. Larry actually devotes a huge swath of black ink made from oat galls, which is an actual thing from medieval times.
Oat galls?
Oat galls. They're like wasp nests. That's where they got the black from.
Just say wasp nests.
This is a learning hour. He actually devotes a huge swath of ink to employees themselves. Companies should be paying attention to things like mental health, working from home, rising pay. These are actually what he calls features of capitalism, not problems. Quote, our research shows that companies who forged strong bonds with their employees have seen lower levels of turnover and higher returns through the pandemic. Truly, truly epic plagiarism of a report I wrote in 2015 where I said, quote, strong human capital strategies may limit downturns in employee output during times of high turnover. No joke. I actually wrote that in 2015.
Okay, but you wrote it for a company that's owned by him, basically.
Yeah, kind of.
And he's their biggest client. So how dare you?
I mean, I guess finally the low-level stooges at BlackRock did read my report 6 years later. That's what I'm telling myself. That's what I want to tell myself. Larry also said that CEOs should be judicious with their non-woke, benevolent, godlike authority over their employees. Quote, they don't want to hear us as CEOs opine on every issue of the day.
I do.
But they do need to know where we stand on societal issues intrinsic to our company's long-term success.
I want to hear them, just as a side, I want to hear them every day. Just like at a press conference after like the Celtics play the Bucks, I want them to sit at a table sweaty and answer a bunch of nonsensical questions.
I a little bit agree. I would like a scroll at the bottom of my computer screen with quotes about what they think of every issue as it appears in real time. That would be great.
I mean, we ask people about throwing a ball out of bounds. I think this is a little bit more important.
But just to be clear, your overlords, the Amazon employees, I know you're reading this letter every single year with bated breath. Your overlord said there is no pee bottle problem. High pee output is just a perk of strong human capital management strategies. That's what that means. Larry did address what I think will be the theme for BlackRock in 2022. The dark heart of governance hypocrisy. Number one, no, BlackRock will not be divesting from the burners of fossil fuel that are lighting the world on fire. They will be engaging. Number two, BlackRock won't be engaging as much as empowering its clients to, quote, participate in the proxy voting process if they choose. And number three, by empowering clients in the second dimension of alternative democracy, quote, we believe this could bring more democracy and more voices to capitalism. Every investor deserves the right to be heard.
Okay.
Except for dual-class companies, which make up the majority of the top 10 companies in the world. Congratulations, passing the buck on to clients to not vote at companies where you would wish you could. But I want to end on my favorite part of annual Larry Palooza with this trifecta of zingers in a little game that I want the two of you to play called Rate the Zinger. Are you ready to play?
Yep.
Wait, these are zingers from the letter?
They're sort of zingers. I don't know.
Okay.
We'll see. Which zinger is better? There are three. You choose the top.
Okay,
No.
got it.
A. Elon Musk blowjob. Quote, in a few short years, we have all watched innovators reimagine the auto industry.
Mm-hmm.
Really? I'm
For
pretty
sure.
sure we're just talking about Elon Musk, right?
Mhm.
There's not
Okay.
other ones.
I see where you're going there.
Number two, the Google Zuckerberg get owned zinger. Quote, the next 1,000 unicorns won't be search engines or social media companies. They'll
Right.
be sustainable, scalable innovators.
I don't buy that
Huh.
one.
Okay.
And number three, the capital T, this is my true threat. Quote, access to capital is not a right, it is a privilege.
I don't
Get
understand that one
owned
either.
capitalism. Which one do you feel like was the truth bomb he set free?
Do I have
I don't wanna
to
play this
rate it
game.
on truth or on?
No, you just pick the one that feels best for
I
you.
don't want to play. I'm not playing.
Because the one
Emma
that
has my
simply
vote.
feels best to me must be option C. But access to capital is not a right; it's a privilege. That's really something, because in order for him to say that, he is talking about the investment world, no? And yeah,
He is. Yeah.
yeah. So Mr. Not Woke over there is acknowledging his privilege. That's very interesting to
Are
me.
we gonna stay around and talk about this after the show? Or are we
Yes,
gonna-
let's.
Okay, let's talk about it.
You still have to pick one right now. Pick one.
The one that said Zuckerberg.
Got it. That's what happened in Larry Palooza today. That's all Larry had to say.
You
He
want me to
dropped the
just
mic
say
and
that
walked
so you could
off.
wrap it up? You
Yes,
needed to, you
exactly.
needed to wrap up that story?
I need
All right,
to
come on.
wrap up the segment because I want to get into the next ridiculous.
Oh, let's
bit
keep
of
going.
news.
There's so much to report on today. It's ridiculous. Usually, just one of these would be
Like a
major
whole
theme of our
show.
whole day.
Yeah.
Up next,
honestly.
the world's biggest ESG bailout. It's got to be the
love
most famous
Oh my God.
ESG bailout ever. Okay, let's take this in order. First, yesterday, the reporting was that Activision Blizzard pushes out dozens of employees over workplace misconduct. That they fired or pushed out about 40 people since July as part of efforts to address allegations of sexual harassment that we've been covering for months. A summary of those personnel actions was scheduled to be released before the winter holidays, but CEO Bobby Kotick sat on them for really unknown reasons, right? I mean, why not release them? The summary also says that Activision had collected about 700 reports of employee concern over misconduct since July. Okay, That's the big news yesterday. Today, right when we're starting our pre-production, here's the headline: Microsoft to buy embattled Call of Duty publisher Activision Blizzard in $68 billion cash bailout. I like how they have to describe them by calling them Call of Duty publisher. I don't even know what the hell Call of Duty is. That's so important. That's
It's
the
like
most
their
important.
most important game.
Okay,
Yeah,
but
like the
that
biggest
has to
game
be an
is.
adjective in that sentence. Call of Duty publisher. Anyway.
I like
I want to
embattled.
focus on a 68 billion. That's what I
Yeah.
want to focus on.
So this is Microsoft's largest ever acquisition, the largest video game acquisition ever in history. Here we go. The price values Activision stock at $95 per share, which it's been nowhere near that since July when the news of the harassment broke. Microsoft will not only acquire game franchises like Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, and Candy Crush, but it will also acquire Activision's deplorable culture issues, including claims that CEO Bobby Kotick knew for years about a variety of claims of sexual harassment and rape at his company and did little to fix the problems. Kotick will continue on with the company and will report to Xbox leader Phil Spencer when the deal closes. Wait, who is Phil Spencer again? He's the dude who said in November that he was disturbed and deeply troubled by the horrific events and actions at Activision, and that he intended to take action, and that this type of behavior has no place in our industry. At the time, Phil did not say how he would take action, but now it is clear by buying their dumb asses. This is what Phil was cooking up. Unfortunately, Phil might be stuck with Bobby, because if Bobby is terminated after a change of control, which is what this is,
Yes.
he's entitled to about $300 million.
That'll teach him.
So what I'm wondering is this turning into a Office Space situation where Bobby's going to be shoved to the basement with like a red stapler? I mean, what's going to happen? Is Bobby going to stay? They're going to get rid of? I mean, this is crazy to me. It's crazy that he'll stay. But anyway, remember, just last year, 78% of shareholders at Microsoft said hell yes to a resolution calling on the company to review the policies it had in place for its employees to protect them against abuse and unwanted sexual advances. And last Thursday, the New York Times reported that Microsoft selected a law firm to review its sexual harassment and gender discrimination policies. So, game on, Activision. The blizzard is now.
No. Well, let's do some quick populist math here.
Yeah, do it.
If they get rid of Bobby Kotick, he's owed $300 million for change of control. By paying $95 a share, the company was trading at $65 a share the day before this was announced, so yesterday. And even today, it's not up at 95, it's at 82. So, and like the market doesn't think it's worth as much as Microsoft. So, like, let's just say they're paying
intellectual
a premium.
property is worth that, I think they're saying, but the culture obviously is not.
Well, apparently it didn't have much of a discount factor because they're paying a whole lots of monies.
Yeah.
50% increase over the trade what it was trading
fun
at
games, Matt. I guess they're really
because
fun.
of their fun games. But Kotick gets $300 million for change of control. He has
If he's
4.8
terminated.
million shares,
Yeah.
which are now worth $95 a share, according to this.
Wow, almost
That's
$300 million.
$456 million. Kotick, by creating the rapiest culture he could possibly think of, earned himself $750 million
Yeah.
overnight. Talk about an ESG bailout.
Well,
this is really amazing.
That's the weird thing about all this is that once you have ownership, there's nothing anyone can ever do about that, right? I mean, you can fire someone, but you can't take away their shares.
I wonder how Larry Fink's going to vote for the acquisition. Do you think how do you vote for this? I mean, is this going to go to a shareholder vote? We can only hope. Let's come back to it in the discussion because this is
Too much to discuss.
so
Emma.
awesome.
Bail us out here,
Emma.
I'm so sorry
us
to
out.
give you one more thing to discuss, but there is
No.
another like relatively large thing that happened this
Yeah.
week. So
Another
my
one of our
story actually,
favorites.
my story requires two headlines. So here's headline number one: billionaire investor Chamath Palihapitiya says nobody cares about Uyghur genocide in China. So, what
Or
a
they don't care
statement.
about it in China, or they don't care, or They don't care
Nobody
about
cares about Uyghur genocide in
Here?
China. Full statement.
Okay. all right.
Anyway.
The
Keep
Uyghur
going.
genocide is happening in China, not the Chinese people caring about the Uyghur genocide. Okay,
Good.
I said it too many times. Anyway, Chamath hosts a tech podcast called All In with 3 other entrepreneurs who mostly talk about big tech news and poker, actually.
Poker?
Um,
Really?
Yep, they talk about poker. If you haven't
That's not-
listened to it, I don't really recommend it per
Yeah.
se.
Not a cliche, Chamath.
More
Congrats.
as like
Okay.
a social experiment. It's really something.
Yeah.
So during last week's episode that dropped last Saturday, Chamath said the following. I'm sorry if that's a hard truth to hear, but every time I say I'm caring about the Uyghurs, I'm really just lying if I don't really care. So I'd rather not lie to you and tell you the truth. It's not a priority for
Okay.
me.
Wait. So that is
Good.
that a
All right.
small T truth or a big T truth?
I'm
That's-
gonna go small T for sure.
Okay, I don't
for
know.
sure.
Yeah, that's his
Um,
T truth, right?
Yeah.
That's his, yep. So,
Yeah,
do I
okay.
agree with this statement? Absolutely not. Do I want him in charge of anything or to have any influence over anyone? Nope. Do I appreciate his honesty? Yeah, I kind of do.
Kind of
Oh,
do.
This-
Emma's.
I guess.
This might be a
surprising
surprising reaction from me, but I don't care too much about this portion of this story. It's borderline refreshing to hear a person who clearly cares more about profit than people say so openly. So thank you, Chamath, for so clearly conveying your belief system to us. All right, moving on. 2 days after the episode was released and all hell broke loose on Twitter, Chamath
course.
tweets a clarifying statement that says the following. I recognize that I came across as lacking empathy. I acknowledge that entirely. As a refugee, my family fled a country
Aw.
with its own set of
Aw.
human rights issues, so this is something that is very much a part of my lived experience. To be clear, my belief is that human rights matter, whether in China, the United States, or elsewhere.
What?
Now,
What? That's a.
Did
gets
you
the-
hear the
yeah.
word Uyghur anywhere in there?
I don't.
No?
I don't know what
No?
that statement's supposed to mean. Yeah.
I didn't hear it. You didn't hear it. That's
I didn't hear it.
read you the entirety of the statement.
I didn't hear
That's
it.
it. That's
Yeah.
all he said. Now I'm disappointed. It's not
Aw.
really an apology. It's not really a retraction. It's definitely not a mea culpa. So what is it? I'm not totally sure, but my guess is that it's mostly a please don't take my precious basketball team away from me gambit. So, Chamath Mother Teresa Palihapitiya is a co-owner of the Golden State Warriors, and the organization released a statement distancing themselves from his Uyghur commentary on the same day that he released his lazy non-apology. Maybe he's getting his favorite billionaire taken.
Ooh.
Maybe getting his favorite billionaire toy taken away from him would teach him a lesson about sweeping an enormous human rights crisis under the rug, but probably not.
Yeah. Well, he's
Wow.
gonna bail anyway after Steph retires, so he doesn't care.
I know.
That is a lot of news. Let's. I don't even know what to do.
Bail us out of
Let's-
here, Emma, and then we can
Here
discuss
we go.
Let's move on.
We're going.
Can we start at the end there? Can I just say that that's the
Yeah.
equivalent of in our Chamath always shows up in our blowhard index.
Oh.
One of our favorite blowhards, and I think you're right, Emma. There is something that we all do consistently appreciate is his honesty. Like it makes for good
Yeah.
ESG podcasts. Well, not good, but it makes us talk about stuff.
It does.
But I'll say this: this is the equivalent of Elon Musk announcing he has Asperger's. It's his way of saying he's a refugee is basically his way of saying like I can do whatever the f I want because I'm a refugee.
Well, I think it was more convenient than anything else.
Yeah, it's
You
kind of
know,
expediency.
But I'm just saying,
It's-
like, why did he?
yeah.
Why did that have to be a part of the apology if he's still not even?
Because he
saying-
didn't apologize.
Oh,
Where was
okay.
there an apology in there?
Right,
he
he's
said, "I
it's a
sound-
clarifying statement.
I can't. Yeah, he called it a clarifying statement. Didn't call it a apology. He didn't
Okay,
call
you
it
know what?
anything.
To be
except
fair,
for
Chamath, we don't care about you, so this is fine. Let's just move on.
He's
This is
just
not the
saying-
yeah.
Human rights matter to someone, not for me.
No, it doesn't matter to me.
Like I have my
okay.
experiences, and I
Yeah.
don't care. That I just want to
Let's move on.
clarify, right?
Let's move on from this clown. Okay.
I love it. I love it. I love it because this is exactly what I want to scroll on my stupid feed, right? Like I want this from CEOs because this is
guess-
what Melody Hobson's talking about when we talked about what her statement last week. What she's talking about is they have a right to their lowercase t truth, but it doesn't mean it's capital T truth.
Yeah,
And
I just worry
that's
it's
the
going to
point.
embolden the idiots. That's what I mostly worry about.
What is social media? Isn't that just idiot emboldening?
Like I had a sense of relief back in the early Trump days when he was just putting it out there, like, yeah, the right wing are a bunch of racist jerks, and I was like, finally, like we don't have to play under the delusion that they're not. But then I just felt like it just emboldened a generation of idiots to carry the torch. So I'm torn here. Now we're gonna get like a big uh, everyone else saying they don't care either, and human rights are a joke, and I
No,
don't
So
know.
interestingly enough, on the podcast, I actually went and
Yeah.
listened to that portion of the podcast, and one of his co-hosts, Jason, who is
Mhm.
another entrepreneur, he fought back. He was like, "That's really disappointing to me." He
Disappointing. Yeah.
Yeah, he was like, I don't believe that that's true. Like, I don't believe that you have to have a bottom line like that. He essentially was disagreeing with Chamath, which was interesting. But I could not listen any farther than that. That is all the information I have.
I mean, but the reason why this is I'll say a fun conversation to have
Yeah. I'm not
is
enjoying it.
because Chamath
Yeah.
runs a fund called
Sure.
the Social Capital Fund.
Yes, he does.
Mhm.
His fund,
Does it have a
he's the
mission?
one who called ESG a fraud. He
Mhm.
runs a fund that's about, it's sort of Kathy Woodish, arcish. Social capital is like the construct.
But like
He
without the
talks-
God.
Yeah, he
There's less
talks a
God.
lot about. Yeah, that's right. It's it's Kathy Wood without God.
Mhm.
But he's a very like data-driven investor. His last annual letter, he talks about the epidemic of obesity. He talks about like how Black Lives Matter, about systemic racism. He talks about these things, and then out of the other side of the mouth, he's like, "Yeah, but I don't care about other human rights things like Uyghurs." Right?
Mhm.
Well, was the context of that podcast supposed to be like a broy context, Emma, where like they're kind of getting drunk and playing poker, or is it meant to be taken
Not
seriously?
it's pretty serious, at least the
Right.
tone of the episode that I heard. So it's four of them, and they're all investors and entrepreneurs and,
It's not like you
multi.
hear bong water rippling in the background,
No,
or
it's not
no.
quite
Okay.
the Joe Rogan experience. I think they take themselves slightly more
Okay.
seriously than that.
Okay.
But they do talk about they were like arguing pretty aggressively. It's not necessarily the most friendly of tones between them. They were arguing pretty aggressively about certain. I listened to the beginning. They were talking
Hmm.
about the insurrection too, and one of the hosts, actually David O. Sachs, who's part of the PayPal mafia, is one of the hosts,
Mm.
and he was arguing about the insurrection, and he was pissed off about how much attention it was getting and about how those aren't the issues that the American people care about, and we all just like need to lay off and
Oh God.
worry about. Yeah, it was
Right.
and they were arguing about it, and they all seem to have like pretty differing views on various things, but it is a very
Okay.
libertarian
And
atmosphere.
and did this spur like an interesting conversation, or did it kind of just get swallowed up?
Interesting might be pushing it,
Okay.
but they
Anyway,
talked.
let's.
here- No, let me
I want to ask
quote.
this question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Matt.
I'm going to quote from Chamath's annual letter. He's talking about
Sure.
Black Lives Matter in the 2020
God.
annual letter, and he says, "quote um, The overwhelming majority of Black Lives Matter protests were just that, peaceful statements of disapproval about the status quo. The reason is over decades we have allowed systemic racism and unconscious bias to affect an entire class of people we're treated." And he lists like where that happens, and then says, "In quote, in no reasonable moral worldview is this acceptable, even in the most reductionist worldview. If it could happen to them, then why not to you?" And then to say Saturday that I don't care about Uyghurs
Hmm.
is
I wonder why he
maybe
does. So why does he
I
double
love it.
down on it? So why do you love it?
I
You
love it
hypocrisy?
because it's very clearly I care about it when I can pinpoint like how it affects my investments. Uyghurs are not a thing that affects my investments. It's not it's like framing the investment conversation as moralistic when it's to your advantage and not caring when it's
Mhm.
not to your advantage is the feels like the
Well,
obvious thing here. And it's not
yeah,
different than Larry. Like
it's actually not
Larry
different than but
basically
it's
just framed stakeholder
yeah.
capitalism as
Well,
shareholder capitalism.
to be fair, it's not different than the modern world we live in, where we're constantly navigating these type of landmines when we just try to like live our daily lives. Because many of the corporations that we do business with face, related problems, and we're constantly making decisions whether we care or don't care at that moment, right? Like we talk about this every time Emma brings up Apple, which is that are we complicit when we buy Apple products, and should we feel complicit, and blah 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 blah. I mean, this so he really is in some ways speaking to, I think, to a modern confusion. So in that respect, like, I honor him airing it, and but it doesn't sound like a lot of interesting conversation is coming from it, at least from him or his bros. But that
No, but
said, yeah.
like the larger context here is stakeholder capitalism is not accountability
That
capitalism.
okay. That's what I was gonna. That's what I was gonna segue this conversation. It was accountability. Is there? Can there be accountability for someone like Chamath? And relate that to the story of Microsoft buying Activision. And
Right. Well, that's the interesting thing, right? Like, because I don't care about knee-jerk Twitter outrage accountability. Like that to me is not real accountability. That's like reactionary accountability, not thoughtful accountability. And the thoughtful accountability is how long does it take Microsoft to assess buying Activision Blizzard? While Microsoft is in the middle of announcing the fact that it's conducting an investigation how it itself handled sexual misconduct allegations about Bill Gates and other employees inside of Microsoft, and maybe there was a bro culture there that was
Mhm.
instilled, it's out there negotiating with what is potentially the card carrying flag holding bro culture company in Activision for a premium that is no one anywhere was thinking was available. Like in fact, if you look at
you
the
say it's a premium. I don't know if I agree with that. A premium based on the post scandal stock price, but clearly a company in its with its intellectual capital and the people they have in place, it's worth a hell of a lot more than this culture that Bobby Kotick okayed, right? I mean, it doesn't. It does. That's not the whole story of the company. I hear what you're saying, but sometimes I have a hard time like painting the whole company with this brush of harassment. It's not all of those workers and all of those people who have created great
no.
work.
No, but they were trading. So, what the market determined, they were trading at $95 a share in April of last year. In July of last year, news broke of this cultural problem. From July until December, it dropped from $95 a share to $57 a share.
Sure.
The market basically said the cultural problems inside this place and the governance problems inside this place are such that you had employees that were leaving, you had
Yeah.
employees that were protesting, they were talking about unionizing. The costs to operating this company far outweigh the potential IP you'd be buying with this company. They valued the company at basically nearly 50% of its high. And Microsoft swooped in and said, no, 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 it's valued at 100% of its high price from last
Well,
year.
because it seems to me the real issue was a corporate governance issue, and that no one knew how to get rid of Bobby. Right? I mean, here's a
And they
company that
still
is
don't.
poised for success. Well, okay, but we don't know if he's going to stay. And a good way to get rid of a powerful CEO is to essentially demote him. I mean,
This is a
effectively,
demotion.
right? I mean, effectively, this is the only way you could have held him accountable, because, as you pointed out many times, the board doesn't seem to care, shareholders don't seem to care. So this is why I'm calling it an ESG bailout, because it's like, let's take it away from these creeps, and we're gonna run it now. I mean, am I
I
wrong?
have to go deal with my child, but I'll leave you with this thought. In what
Yeah.
universe is $700 million payout accountability?
Okay. Well,
He doesn't have to deal with
but this is
any
why
of the
uh,
actual
I hear
issues.
you.
He
But I
passes
raised
them
this
off
point
and makes
earlier.
$700 million.
Okay, but what do you do? How do you hold a share owner accountable then? You can't. Is there a process to take people's shares away? Like, have we gotten to that point yet? No.
Yeah, clawbacks, but not
No, not
this.
share. You can't call back shares. All right. Are
Nope.
we meant to keep going, or is he coming back? What do you want to do, Emma?
It's unclear to me. I think that we keep going until we
Yeah,
reach
let's
our
keep going.
natural conversation end point, and if he's here, great. If not,
Uh,
whatever.
what I want to know is, so are we fully now in the culture where woke is fully and officially a dirty word?
So I think that the thing that I have never gotten to fully explain about my
Yeah.
distaste for the word woke is that it is not. There are a whole host of secondary reasons, but first and foremost, it's cultural appropriation. I believe, comes from
Okay.
AAVE, and white people, white liberals, have co-opted the word to mean something that it doesn't. So in the Black community, when it's used in an AAVE
Okay.
context,
That
it
may
used.
that
Yeah.
may be Emma, but is it? Are you finding that? Aren't you finding that it's the right wing of the political spectrum that is using the word? Do you find people that you're hanging out with using the word woke?
Never.
Right. So I'm just saying, like, but it's true that the right wing in America is mostly white people, but they're
Hmm.
using it as a tool in a
So
different way than you're kind of implying, right?
right. So woke has been
They're
used and
using it as
co-opted.
slander. They're using it as an
They're
insult.
using it as slander, but the reason that I don't want to use it is because it
Right.
is cultural appropriation from AAVE, and white liberals specifically have taken that word, and the original co-option of it was to mean conscious, to mean socially conscious, to mean,
Right.
it was a signal to say,
Look,
hey, I'm woke. I believe that black people should have rights and shouldn't be incarcerated for petty crimes, and that systemic white supremacy is a bad thing, and like it's just a signal. But it was, first of all, so co-opted and appropriated from AAVE, which is one of the reasons I don't like to use it, because it meant
look,
something different for black people in the black community. It was
they're
supposed to be stay vigilant. It was supposed to be like be aware, that kind of a thing, and then it got appropriated to mean what it
there's
means today.
the American culture has essentially been created by the minorities of black people and Jewish people.
Hmm.
Like I know that there are. I know that's like a very generalized statement because there are certainly a lot of other things going on within our culture, but there's so many contributions from those minorities to the majority culture that we sort of represent here. So this, to me, this is just like one of millions. I
Oh
actually
yeah.
find to be a I find to be a very positive thing. And Matt and I were saying before the show, we're quite a bit older than you. So,
Hmm.
we come from a generation where that idea is very sort of affirming and hopeful and it's sort of a pro education and pro human rights and all that. So I
But for
so
the
I
people,
yeah.
for the language that the term comes from, we're using it incorrectly. We use the word, we have completely turned
But
that
who's
word
we?
in.
But who's using it now other than as a insult? Who is I don't know I
White
don't hear
people. So
people. Liberals are
even
using the word still?
when you paint something as woke, so you
Yeah.
label a person, an
But who?
institution, you use a very
Who
general.
paints who does this though? It's only the right wing, right? Do left wing people paint things as woke?
Yeah, I think they do,
Okay, I guess
especially
I'm
in
not seeing
years
that.
past too.
In years
I think
past,
that
yeah.
it's falling more out of fashion for sure.
Right.
But originally, especially, I don't know, like during the summer of 2020 or whatever, when businesses would put, a Black Lives Matter sign up, oh, that business is now automatically woke. But if you're saying, okay, this
Right,
business
but
is woke for doing this very
yeah.
superficial, performative thing, and then you get to slap a label on them as aware, socially conscious, woke, that isn't
Okay.
sufficient. That also isn't real.
I guess in modern times, meaning now, I've never heard the term being used in a positive way. So that's why I'm like when you're saying it was appropriated, I'm not disagreeing, but I've only seen it as a weapon. I've never seen it use it positively. Like even Larry Fink is distancing himself from the term, right?
But I
Because
think that Larry Fink is distancing himself from the term because of the way that more conservative populations use that word, not the way that like
well,
you
yeah.
would use that word.
Well,
Because
to me, it's all
he
I'm just
doesn't want to be seen as woke from their perspective. Because if he's seen as woke, then he's going to
or
be
any
seen as like
perspective.
catering to the democratic agenda or whatever. You know, that's why he doesn't want to be associated with the word woke. He doesn't want to not be associated with that word because of the hypothetical positive connotations that it could bring. He doesn't care about that. He will signal that to the liberal, the right,
It's
the
so
left, the
confusing.
whoever
So
in a
then we're
different way. But if by being seen as specifically by shirking the term woke, he is trying to pander to the populations that don't want to be seen as catering to various, you know, socially liberal causes or
well,
whatever.
I
That's
think
what
he's
he's
making a big mistake whenever you like peddle in soundbite America. I think you're making a big mistake. I don't know why he needs to even weigh into that territory. I mean,
because old light white men love talking about how being woke is stupid, but they
and they
are
also and they're
arguing it
also
from the
afraid
exact wrong direction.
of alienating, uh, the right part of the
Yeah.
political spectrum, which
Yeah, they're like, we're not woke. Don't worry. If you invest with us, you're
right.
not woke because we aren't either.
But
Don't
really,
worry. It's fine.
your argument about appropriation aside, like to me, it is just a continuation of the term political correctness. I think people got bored of saying political correct and
I read a
PC.
really good article about how woke has replaced race card in terms of cringiness.
Sure.
When people
Eh,
say the race card, it's like
right.
that's cringy. You hear that and that's cringy. And then I think the same thing has now been applied to woke. When you hear people say, "Oh, that's woke," it feels the same level of cringiness. It's like, "Ooh, you are painting with way too broad a brush. You don't know what you're talking about."
And the reason why it all irritates me is because to me they're all positive things. Even the thought of being politically correct, at least when I was educated, is a positive connotation. I mean, you're you're raised, you're educated, you're trying to understand the boundaries between ethics and morality and law, and it's like making the politically correct decision is a good thing. It like represents your education. Like it's like
It just no like if we're talking strictly etymology of the terms, it just feels like the terms get co-opted, right? Like it feels like
well,
woke got
it's a
co-opted by
soundbite.
Marco Rubio as a way to create a rage machine on the other side. That
Yeah,
just like race card was a term like for conservatives to just say, oh, you're just playing the race
all the
card.
same, all the same.
Like it is
It's there.
politically
It's
But like I was
correct.
saying to Damien, not the term woke got co-opted by the Marco Rubios of the world, but first it got co-opted by the white liberals from AAVE, who culturally appropriated it from there, which it used
well,
to mean something entirely different, but
liberals.
now that word is no
Don't
longer
forget.
used.
Don't forget. Liberals are not just. They're not just owned by white people. I mean, this is a distinction. But this is a distinction that doesn't exist on the other side in the right wing of politics in America. Is that the left wing is not just white people. I don't completely agree that it was just co-opted by quote unquote white liberals. I mean, there's a rainbow on the left. But
There
my
is,
bigger
but white liberals have a history of doing this with many terms of this
Okay,
ilk.
but they also have a history of forming bonds with non-white people and forming coalitions with a diverse set of constituents. Like this is what we preach here. This is why playing the race card is actually a great thing. It's you're showing you're showing like that diversity is a positive thing. And but my
But
bigger
that
point here is I just don't think he should have. I just think he was stupid to weigh in on a soundbitey cultural war momenty PCE. I just think it's like to me it clouds his argument because I don't know I don't know what side he really is on. I don't because
well,
That's
that
the
to me
point.
is that's
right.
what's buried in the text here. I mean, he answers the question what side he's on, which is stakeholder capitalism is about delivering long-term durable returns for shareholders. He's on the same side he's
Okay, you're
always
focusing on that,
been
Matt,
on.
and I copied a lot of phrases from his letter I wanted to talk about, and that was one of them. And I agree that like in some ways that's sort of the what's most important. The the long term. What is it? The long-term
durable
value
returns for shareholders.
But I don't know
Yeah.
if you're like overly focusing on that. I think that's okay. I mean, I don't think that's like uh, without long-term value for shareholders, the company sort of ceases to exist. But he is saying more than that. That's not. You're kind of there's more context to that when he builds to that line. I mean, he does talk a lot about the importance of the stakeholder constituents in order to create long-term shareholder value. And believe me, I don't want us to be on his side for this one, but I think you're over focusing on that. I I think there's more nuance to it than that. Is what I'm trying to say.
You might be adding your
I'm buying
nuance
the
to it,
Kool-Aid.
right? Like
I'm drinking it.
but I think, look, it's like, call it semantic, but the definition of the term stakeholder capitalism to me is one in which stakeholders enjoy in the benefits that shareholders have exclusively enjoyed in, right? Like where and I don't mean it in like the socialist way where you're spreading the wealth, but in order for a company to thrive, and that isn't the shareholder, like defining the company as the shareholder is not what I mean. I mean, like he talks about how employees, you have to, basically he says companies, you have to get over it. Like your relationship with your employees has changed. That means it's rising pay. It's yada, yada, yada. Like these are now the expectations. Effectively, he's saying like, you have to pay that stakeholder. But in a way, by defining the reason you have to pay it as so that I can make money as a shareholder, so that our clients can make more money.
Yeah, well, that's what they need to hear.
Is to me like, well, that's not what stakeholder capitalism is about. That's still shareholder capitalism that leverages
shareholders are part
stakeholders
of that,
for them.
But shareholders are one part of that stakeholder tree.
Yeah, but we have shareholder capitalism. We have the shareholder is the be all and end all. That's the top of that tree.
But the phrase is that he's saying a company must create value for and be valued by its full range of stakeholders in order to deliver long-term value for its shareholders. I mean,
I guess not really. I mean, he says that.
But in a system where where employees actually own stock, I mean, this is a good thing.
But that's not what he espouses.
We talk about pension for. We always talk about pension for teachers, and I think it's one. But
he doesn't espouse that. That's not what he's saying. He's not saying that.
He's saying your company's. He's saying your company's fucked if you don't pay attention. What he's saying is very 2022, and what I think we do here is you're fucked long term if you ignore the stakeholder capitalism revolution.
Right.
I mean,
and
clearly,
the
not an actual revolution, but
the we here is the interesting part to me, because it's very similar to the that Bloomberg expose on MSCI, which wasn't much of an expose, which effectively said MSCI's ESG ratings are about risk to shareholders. It's about like it doesn't solve a stakeholder problem. It doesn't solve climate change. It's about where is shareholder risk? Where are companies going to lose money? He comes into the same view. I don't have a problem with that view per se, but I don't call that stakeholder capitalism. I would not say stakeholder capitalism is about furthering the ends of shareholders. I would call stakeholder capitalism.
But he's talking to a group of shareholders.
No, he's talking to CEOs. He's not talking to shareholders.
Oh.
The letter is to CEOs of companies. So he's basically saying to the CEOs.
This is still a relatively novel idea, too, though. I mean, we're not completely out of this idea that shareholders are king and queen, right? I mean that.
Well, he's saying you need to take care of your employees for me, your shareholders.
Okay,
so that
but this is still a relatively
more money.
new. It's old news for us, but this is still pretty groundbreaking for many of the companies and CEOs he's talking to.
Yeah, great. I don't care. Like it's still like to Emma's point about like the term woke. It's a co-option of a concept that's existed from the 70s that isn't about furthering the aims of shareholders. It's actually about repainting the purpose of a company as not shareholders. So what he's saying is effectively out of one side of his mouth, you have to live your purpose and yada, yada, yada. There's a lot about purpose in there, having a corporate purpose. But
Yeah.
out of the other side
That's
of
where
his
I get
mouth
lost there
saying,
too.
but the purpose you do have is your durable returns to me. And in order for you to achieve that purpose, you need to pay attention to these other
Well,
things.
to me that's a win in the short term, because one of the only reasons why I agreed to join this horrible company, Free Float Media, is that the idea
Join. You started it.
the idea is that slowly you can, by treating stakeholders well, even if you can slowly convince the market to treat stakeholders better year over year, unwittingly, by convincing them that it affects the bottom line of their shares and the share return. You know what I mean? Like, because they're not going to agree to do it on their own. This is where I don't agree with you guys. Is that what replaces this? What's the model that replaces this? Because these companies, these CEOs are going to do nothing on their own, and as we've talked about way too many times, we're not going to get the regulation we're looking for. So what? So other than scaring these CEOs into like saying that the long-term shareholder value of your company is going to be fucked if you don't do this, what do you suggest we do to get companies and CEOs to pay attention to their stakeholders? What? I don't know.
Look, I think actually, in a weird way, I think the Business Roundtable is closer than Larry Fink is right now, because I think what like CEOs themselves should be treating shareholders as one stakeholder. Larry Fink is saying that you need to treat your other stakeholders well so that shareholders benefit. Larry Fink is putting shareholders at the top of a stakeholder capitalist pyramid.
Right. Okay, but
CEOs,
maybe that's a trick. But maybe it's like a trick of a liberal.
But then he says it's not a social or ideological agenda.
Right,
like,
but you have to. Okay, but this is to negotiate with idiots. You have to do it this way. You have to tell them. You have to say it's not woke. It's not going to help anyone. We're not going to. We don't believe in. We don't believe in labor. We don't believe in. There's only two gender. Don't worry. Like, but you have to say these things.
Two genders.
I'm saying you have to say these things to convince these people to do anything. You can't tell these people that you're going to help anyone. It just doesn't work that way.
You are talking about a guy who developed mortgage-backed securities. He started the Blackstone Group. He has he basically is the definition of a capitalist for the history of his entire life. Pulling the puppet strings of CEOs to make them woker for his ideological gain.
So you prefer
that's
nothing?
What's
you
happening?
Prefer silence? So you'd prefer silence? You'd both prefer
no,
nothing?
I prefer what I think. I don't prefer silence. Why does he need to say that stakeholder capitalism is shareholder capitalism? Like that stakeholders are here to deliver value
to the old white
men
men who pissed their khakis. They can't handle
companies.
it. They can't handle it.
But what might be better is to empower the CEOs of the companies to say, we are one of your stakeholders. You need to deliver value to all of your stakeholders to prosper. Why is
That's what he's saying. How is he not saying
No,
that?
he's saying stakeholder capitalism is about delivering returns to shareholders.
You're focusing on that one sentence, but there's a lot
which is the
that.
sentence. That's it.
Okay, well, is there anything wrong with that? I don't see why there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, he puts himself at the top of the pyramid, which is the ultimate white male privilege thing to do, first of all. But also, how is it different from the existing hierarchy? Emma, please back me up here, because Damien, I feel like, wants to get on the... Like, he wishes Larry Fink would grow a beard and turn into Jack Dorsey right now. And I think that this is
I just think
a little bit of a subversion of the term. It's a co-option of the term stakeholder capitalism for a shareholder capitalist end.
I just think progress is a slow trickle. So I'm buying into that thought. And
it's
Emma,
a
you
slow
can
trickle,
tell me
but
to
he's
shut up.
making such a nothing statement. He's saying that.
But you
first of all, when
agree
he's
with? Do
talking
you
about-
not agree with the statements? Forget who he is. Did you read the letter? Did you read all the parts about stakeholders? And do you not agree with that in principle?
the principle that shareholder capitalism is stakeholder capitalism.
No, but there's a lot before that. It's about like honoring stakeholders, which has never been done before. This is new
This is new, fine,
for this
but
world.
I don't really look. I would rather it be said than not said. But the
Well,
way
there you go. That's it. Show's over.
but the way that he said it was so lazy and at
I
like
get
the
you. I hear you.
lowest possible tier. And he basically was saying it because there's been all this labor movement. So he
Good.
said
Good.
mental health was rarely discussed, like wages weren't
Then
adjusted
it's
for
working.
inflation, blah 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 blah. Like that's not the world we live in anymore. I'm like, okay, yeah, you did nothing about that. Laborers did something about that. The
It's
workforce did something about that. You did
to me,
nothing
to me,
to
it's the
help.
same thing as my Starbucks argument. If you empower people, they might feel empowered, even if it's nonsense, even if you don't even really mean it. You're not intending to empower them, but if you keep telling them that they might be important, and there might be a pillar on something, and blah blah blah, mental health's important, maybe they'll start to buy into it, and maybe the idea of the alternative democracy will start to grow from that. I know, but look, when you look at it day to day, it does seem nothing. It seems meaningless. It seems shit. But Emma, if you had joined us 5, 10 years ago, none of this was even like whispered
None of this
about.
existed. Fine. I'm
Right.
with you on that
Well,
front.
something.
However, he's talking to CEOs.
Trump lovers.
And he's oh yeah, for sure. He's talking to CEOs and he's telling them that shareholder capitalism is stakeholder capitalism. But most shareholders are not like an individual household. Most shareholders are large institutions, and that's who he's talking to. He wants to keep when he's completely erasing a huge swath of stakeholders, because when he says stakeholders, he means institutional investors. That's who he means.
What? I don't know. That's not. I don't know if I agree with that. I don't. But when you mean when he says shareholders?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, when
Okay,
he
you
says
said stakeholders.
shareholders,
Okay,
he's
okay,
talking about
fine.
institutional
Look,
shareholder, because
I'm not
the divide
expecting.
between who holds
Yeah,
all of all of public company shares in America are widely held by institutional investors, not retail investors. That's not what he's talking about.
I'm not expecting Finckrock to not be himself. The same way I don't expect the chief kneeler supreme Jamie Dimon to not be him. But I just think that they're at least on the right edge of the wet khaki system here, because they know they're at least looking forward, which I'm surprised about. They know that from a long-term perspective, you have to get in front of these things now, or
Yeah,
they,
but
so
we said at the
I'm
time.
honoring that they at least are way more evolved than most of their brethren, which could care
Here's what would be impressive
seemingly
to
care
me.
less.
I would like to see him actually do something with the company that he runs.
Like what?
He says
Anything.
that he will in the letter. He said they're
Call it
working with their employees in the letter, kind of
call
thing.
it like Green
That's
Rock or
cool.
something.
He
Red
can
Rock.
write it in a letter all he wants. I would like to see something actually come
Let's
out of it, or else I am wholly unmoved.
Before I
Here-
fire both of you, can we talk about the divestment versus
Engagement piece.
engagement, and can we talk about the handing off the vote to
Yeah, I want to get to both of those things. I
Yeah.
will say that this is a
Yeah.
quote from his 2019 letter.
Yeah.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Profits are essential if a company is to effectively serve all of its stakeholders over time, not only shareholders, but also employees, customers, and communities.
Yeah.
In his prior letters, he's basically putting shareholders amongst the stakeholders.
They are.
In his current letter, he's putting stakeholders below the shareholder, right? Like he's
Okay, where I
he's-
guess I'm not reading it that way.
and I'll
But you
say
probably
this
had
also.
better SATs than I did, so I'll give you
To
this.
Emma's point, when I do a review of his portfolio managers at his company, and they are 89% white,
Agreed. I agree.
and 70% male, and
Yeah.
they control $4 trillion in capital, it's really hard to sit around and say, oh yeah, stakeholders are a focus of your company, not shareholders. The shareholder class is white men. Period.
I'm gonna end this part of the argument by saying that I still kind of adhere to this very 1990s Gen X version of things, which is to be woke to a stakeholder capitalism is a positive thing. Like that, I'm still like leaning in that camp. Like that this, even in the short time that we've been in
Aren't you supposed to
ESG,
beep him for saying woke?
that
I don't.
this
He
feels
just
like a significant victory in the short term.
But tell
That's
me
it.
about divestment and engagement, because I think the
I
reason why he's not divesting is because 60% of his business, maybe
is
70%, is passive.
right. Look. This one's completely fascinating to me because I always go back and forth in my head about this issue. So I just wanted to hear what you two think. I agree with him wholeheartedly that the prospect of divesting and sending a lot of these companies into a private murky world frightens me even more. Like
Granted.
we rail on Facebook all the time, and and I think that the sentiment is that we like basically if you're not gonna do one share one vote and you're gonna and you're gonna do all these things like get out of the hey Nasdaq, get rid of them, hey listing regulations, stop the nonsense. But the idea of Facebook going private scares me even more than the current situation. So I yeah.
I mean, I'm with you on both of those things, but in the context of the letter, right? He says we will not divest, we will engage. You cannot
That I don't believe. I
engage.
don't believe they're actually going to engage.
You cannot engage with Facebook. What's the point? So your option is basically he's saying
You
like the
can by
dual class
engaging with
companies.
Nasdaq.
But he's saying dual class companies get a pass from this, and
Well, this
he
is okay.
couples it.
Well, it's an important thought because this is one of the biggest failures of the ESG industry is that topic right there. It like you can see, and I'm not just MSCI.
All of them.
I'm only mentioning them because I'm extremely familiar with the way the methodology works and the way the report writing works. But it is just like it's an issue that they ignore completely. Like maybe maybe there's a red flag and it's like a 0.0001 whatever. It's just but this to me is like it's super important. But anyway.
And not only that, though, like, so he's already giving a pass to dual class companies, which, like, okay, some of the most heinous activity in the entire world is happening at the companies in which you have no right to vote. Google, Facebook, so already we're at a disadvantage.
Controlled companies, yeah.
But then he says we will not divest, we will engage. But then he uses as a threat, quote, access to capital is not a right, it is a privilege. Access to capital is basically investing in you. Basically, he's saying we will invest in you when we believe that you will provide, stakeholder value. He's saying access to capital is not a right. We have the right to withhold capital from your company if you cannot provide purpose and meaning and stakeholder value and durable value, yada, yada, yada. Oh, except we won't divest from you. So access to capital is not really a threat that you're holding if you are simultaneously going to say we will not divest from you.
I agree with you there. I don't. Where I applaud Larry is just entering into this conversation in the first place. I just applaud the stakeholder capitalism story. I think that long term.
Did you guys get drinks this weekend? What did you do?
It's valuable, but there's no way I buy any of this part of Larry. I think this is all just horseshit. There's no the discerning moment when he invests or divest. It's all bottom line here. I don't believe any of this purpose stuff.
He takes the standard view, which is my client. We have clients that want to divest and they divest, right? Like we basically are the mirror of our clients. But it's like what my problem with these letters are, there's simultaneously this mix of himself, his thoughts, BlackRock, and then his deferring to his clients and being like, well, my clients want to divest, they can divest. We will not divest. And my clients want this. And
he's
then
he also defers to a ruling class a lot, which is
he defers to, like, in the same way Jamie Dimon,
which he is,
where when he's kneeler in chief, is basically recognizing there are barbarians at the gate. The plebes are circling. I am making $30 million a year and I can't reject it because it would offend my board. But at the same time, like, oh, the stakeholder class is going to uprise if we don't deal with income inequality. Give me my 30 million. I don't want to offend a couple of fucking white guys, but I also like we need to put a cap on it. Like we got to find a way to put a pin in the upcoming revolution. There's a lot of this.
That's fine in the short term as long as people are getting actual returns. I mean, wages are actually increasing, benefits are actually increasing.
But why are wages increasing? Wages are increasing because during the pandemic, a bunch of employees looked around and were like, "Fuck this." Right? Like, what have we been toiling for going to the office 9 to 5 every single day? What do we get out of this?
This is why this conversation is powerful, I think. I mean,
but it isn't because Larry Fink writes letters to the CEOs that wages went up. It's because the stakeholders themselves picketed.
Okay, that's part of it. But he's honoring the ruling class is starting to like very uncomfortably honor these tenants, and I think long term it could have a powerful effect. I'm hoping.
I'm lick their own ass cheeks.
I'm the stupid one.
And lick their own ass cheeks by saying things like stakeholders are a means to a shareholder end.
Here are two things I do hate. I hate that he says we focus on sustainability not because we're environmentalists, but because we are capitalists.
Oh my
God. Although I will say, again, this is another one like throwing a bone to like the Charlie Mungers. But I will say this is that he does have a point in the sense that what good will be our ruling class if the Earth ceases to exist in 30 years. So I kind of get that. The other thing I love here that I'm surprised you didn't bring up is that they are launching a center for stakeholder capitalism.
I did. I had that in my notes.
I don't know why I didn't mention that because Larry, I'm clearly the only one on your side, so you should be calling me to participate in that center. I could be your clown gesture or whatever. But not these two. They're not going to help you.
I need more specifics on the Center for Stakeholder Capitalism.
I can tell you.
It sounds like a building donation to like an Ivy. I don't know.
It does sound like Charlie Munger's windowless dorm.
Does it not? Yeah.
It's a Sackler. Yeah, it's a Sackler-funded windowless dorm designed by
the windowless dorm of stakeholders.
But here's what it is: to create a forum for research, dialogue, and debate. Yeah, it sounds like absolute bullshit.
Look, I don't have a problem. I actually don't have a problem with like the ideology that is capitalism trumps stakeholders. I don't care about that. What I care about is when you're talking out of both sides of your mouth in the same letter about some of the same issues and co-opting a term that actually has some meaning, right? Stakeholder capitalism has meaning, and it has meaning that's existed since the 70s, and we're the same way when like a bunch of liberals co-opt the term woke from its original usage, it makes Emma and like an age cohort cringe, where us dumbass old people don't cringe. I have the same problem when you're co-opting a term that has meaning for something that you are then applying your own sort of, well, now I'm making it capitalism. Like I'm saying this is in service to shareholders. That's not really the meaning.
It's not the
spirit
of the concept.
To be fair to you, Emma, we were raised in a
me.
Yeah, to be fair to you, we were actually raised at a time where we were allowed to talk to people who weren't identical to us.
That's true.
So you know, we actually had that opportunity. You missed out on that thought.
I mean,
anyway,
my first vote in any presidential election got Trump elected. So yeah, I live in quite a world. My adulthood has been in quite a world.
I do think like, but my problem is with the hypocrisy, right? Like you can't say we will not divest and we will give a pass to dual class companies simultaneously.
Yeah,
you're going to say access to capital is not a right, it's a privilege, but we won't divest, which means you're actually it is a privilege, right? Like as soon as you list it, it's a privilege because you're listed.
And that's where
you can't be throwing Google and Zuckerberg under the bus by saying it won't be search engines are the companies of the future. It's going to be scalable innovators. But like, then leave your money with them. Right?
Clearly, his copywriter wrote that for him because that's just a bullshit statement. He knows
you can't say that governance matters and say the innovators of the future reimagining the auto industry are allowed to put their brothers on the board.
Yeah,
like the talking out of both sides of your mouth is my problem. You can't say stakeholders are the future, but shareholders are the ones they serve.
Well,
That
this is
to
where,
me is the
yeah,
disconnect.
this is where
It's
I'm not
not the
impressed.
concepts.
This is where I'm not impressed with this idea that he's giving some investors more control over their vote, because I actually think that's going to have the effect of watering down activism.
I think
I think
that's right.
BlackRock should just go for it. Like, to be fair, they don't. I don't know that there's a single company that they own much more than they top out usually around 10%. Even that's a lot, but it's not like they have a controlling stake anywhere. Why not just push your activism all the way to the limit? Vote against everything that you actually say that you believe in these letters, and see if you can move the needle a little bit. It's not
That's
gonna
what I'm.
it's not gonna determine the vote, but it is gonna start a conversation. So I don't know why you're handing off responsibility, and I don't know, just like lean into your activism, lean into the moment, as opposed to what Matt's saying, which is just like, sitting on the wall and appealing to the loser Damians in the world, and appealing to the Jamie Dimons in the world. Like, I'm with you on that.
Well, that's what I'm saying is that why do I have to read a bajillion page letter to other CEOs rather than just
Two
watch you do
pages.
something?
2 fucking pages.
Look,
Well, look, this is where I am torn again, because, and I compare it to the Business Roundtable and to everybody else. He actually, in this world, is doing something. I know he has more power to do even more, but I still think like this is relatively shocking for this environment.
Nah.
I know
no, I
Matt is
think
dubious.
he's reactionary to
Mm-mm.
this environment.
Okay,
I don't
fine, but
think he's
it's
leading. I think he's following.
okay, but I still strongly believe in the idea of like starting the conversation. It's kind of like that old thing that Obama used to say used to piss me off too, which is that, you know I got to hear your voice, make me want to change things, make your voice loud, and I'll change things. And which is irritating because, I think we thought voting him in, he could do the changing, and he didn't do much changing. But the point being, you got to have the conversation. You got to go through this painful part of any kind of progress. It doesn't just You can't just suddenly snap your fingers and convince Charlie Munger to put windows in. It just
I'm
doesn't work
not.
that way.
I don't. I don't. I'm happy to have the conversation. I don't like having both conversations simultaneously in the same letter. Land in a place. If you're gonna be of the opinion that CEOs should have purpose, but then you write a letter that basically has dual purposes: to lick the ass of capitalism and to appease some sort of stakeholder conversation. If you're going to say we want to empower our clients to vote, but we also aren't going to divest from the companies that they are going to vote at that you don't have a right to vote at anyway, because the votes are held by dual class dictators. If you're going to say stakeholders matter to the purpose and future and durability of your companies, but also we matter more, it should be in service to us. If you're going to say all the things, it has no meaning to me. That's my problem, that he
Matt,
basically is sitting in the middle.
Yeah, but we
like
come from
every good CEO. So congrats to him for being the ultimate middle.
But whether we liked it or not, we came from an industry that, even when we first started pushing these concepts of diversity in leadership, right? You were forced to make a business case for it, whether you liked it or not. All those meetings we attended, I think you wanted to just be like, it's 2017. Like, fuck your, why do we have to explain this to you? But you had to, you had to make, you sort of have to go through the motions. I feel like that's all he's really doing here. I mean, what is he going to push for a socialist system? I don't understand.
No, but while he and Chamath parse words about what is true and what aren't, and while we sit around and we blow hard on each other, there are real Uyghurs. And there is real climate change.
How dare you? How dare you call Larry a Uyghur?
My point is, he can parse the middle as much as he wants, and he can start the conversation. Meanwhile, 2050 is not that far away, right? Like we actually have to do real things.
Yeah. No, I
And
agree.
your letter does none of the real things. Now, maybe what he's going to do is, and this was my prediction for 2022, was BlackRock goes, and this is ironic because my prediction is BlackRock goes from the villain to the anti-hero. They actually vote the way he's talking about. And I think he's playing the political nuanced parse in the middle, where he's basically saying, like, this stuff's all important. Pre-S, stakeholder isn't a reinvention of shareholder capitalism. Like, you have the right to vote, but don't worry, it's not real right to vote in a lot of places. We're not going to divest, but we will, we'll use access to capital as the cudgel. Like, he's saying all the things. And then when they vote, that's when the real color comes out. That's when you're going to see that BlackRock actually is going to vote the shit out of
really
net
so?
zero and carbon. That's my
Well,
prediction.
those seem like easy votes.
If they don't, you'll know which side of this coin he's on, right? Where he's not, there isn't a nuanced middle when you have to vote yay or nay on a thing.
Well,
and that's what's going to happen. And my prediction is they become an anti-hero, no matter how much I hate the fact that he's painting himself in this as this centrist. You got to pick a side when you start voting.
This is truly the modern Obama game then. It's like he's instead of being the activist that he has the power to be, he's telling activists, like, here are the keys. I'll let you if you have the gumption and the guts, I'll let you mess around, but I'm not going to do it for you. Like, it's the Obama principle. It's the same thing.
It's actually the great disappointment of that slough to handing to his shareholders to vote themselves, which he's viewing as like increasing democracy in the process and yada yada yada.
Well,
but really what it is sloughing
scrutiny.
your convictions that you keep talking about off to somebody else, so you don't have to own there's no more accountability.
Maybe he's smarter than he looks.
It's the central conceit of today's show, accountability, and it doesn't.
Maybe he's doing that to shut up the right wing, which is that we're not a monopoly. We gave you the opportunity to vote.
But guess who
against
owns
the nuns?
Guess who owns the vote, right? Like it's people with 60 million or more basically fiduciaries. He basically handed it to large pension funds. So he hands political risk to a bunch of political appointees. There is nothing more satisfactory than basically saying, you guys make your own decision, get yourself voted out. Right? Like instead of the CEO who actually doesn't have to be accountable to a lot of this, like Marco Rubio can change through regulation what Larry Fink does, but Marco Rubio can change very quickly what the Florida State Pension Fund does. There is no more pressure that he can exert. Like his pressure is significantly greater over there than it is over here. He can decry woke capitalism all he wants, but he can actually make change inside Florida how that pension fund votes. And Florida now has to make a choice. Do we vote ourselves or do we not? And Marco Rubio is going to say to Florida, why didn't you vote yourselves? Because those woke capitalists are voting in a way we don't agree with. In fact, it's brilliant. It's a brilliant way to sort of slough all of this nonsense off and the system doesn't change. That to me is the big problem with talking out of both sides of your mouth, because you don't actually have to be accountable for anything that happens. And that to me is today's news cycle is amazing.
But no one's accountable for anything except for if you go to a tennis match and you don't quarantine. Then you're.
But that's why this to me is a tennis match you don't quarantine for. Right. It's basically having it all ways, and it's meaningless.
Well, this is
so Larry.
That's the sort of the undercurrent of everything we cover. Is that it is damn near impossible. It's damn near impossible to hold anyone accountable, because even when we finally get a CEO to step down, either their parachute, the golden parachute, is massive, or they still own a lot of shares, or they land on their feet in like 2 months, like
everyone,
or less, like. So this is the hardest part of this.
Unless, of course, business. You're the founder of a
woman,
a blood company that's a woman, or you're founder of women.
I'm not speaking for women here, Matt. I'm speaking. I'm not doing that.
Okay, good. Just
Yeah.
making sure.
They don't land on their feet. Yeah.
They usually get sent to jail and
Yeah,
then have
because-
to get in CBD with Snoop Dogg to reinvent their careers.
Because Marissa
Good job,
Mayer,
Martha.
Marissa Mayer, I always get
Mayer.
that name wrong.
Mayor.
As an example, even when she does land on her feet 5 years later, the business press will ridicule whatever position you found for yourself. Like they will stick by you and ridicule you until you die. Like that.
Yeah.
So
She's a
Wow.
punchline forever.
yeah.
Remind
okay.
me to never be a CEO of anything.
Well, we're gonna need a.
Congrats to me for being a CEO.
We're gonna need
of
something.
this stupid enterprise.
When Matt and I just punch each other to death in a few years, someone's gonna need to step up here.
And you and Ari are taking over. Speaking of, do we have anything else for this show now that we're in the 6th hour
much.
of discussing
much.
Larry
Too
Fink?
much.
That
Nope.
was Emma Lurking and Damien Black Ink
matter.
Rawless. I am Matt, the Laughingstock Muscardi. I'm going to take on that moniker from Emma today.
Yes.
We are Free Float Media. This was Business Pants. We actually got a voicemail that we need to address. We need to address it in a coming show this week, and
Yep.
it was about how public utilities and
Okay, stop talking for once.
stuff. Subscribe, share. This is real talk. This is like real talk about ESG in real life. So this is what you should be listening to, not some other bullshit. Come back tomorrow where we have more Biz New Guts.